talk to about this sort of thing who say, Marcellus, what are you doing, man? What are you doing going on TV? What are you doing? You're an activist. You're 11 years old. What do you tell them?
I say that I'm doing it for my mom, and my teacher, Matt, is really excited that I'm doing all of this and that he's been following my every move.
I'm almost afraid to ask you what you want to do when you grow up because you're more grown up than a whole lot of people I know. Have you ever thought about that? What do you want to do when you grow up?
I want to become the president of the United States.
Oh, well, all right. You heard
little
it
Marcellus Owens being used by Barack Obama because they know that their approval ratings have dropped to the lowest ever in history for Congress, the president, you name it. This guy's more unpopular than Richard Nixon in his last months now. And there's poor little Marcellus Owens, I'm sure a well-meaning person being duped, thinking he's giving people free health care. And I showed you the Associated Press earlier. In fact, here it is, Marcellus, where it says in the bill, kids are not covered for pre-existing conditions. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be able to refuse coverage to children with pre-existing conditions. Right there, Associated Press. Oh, and Hitler loved always having kids around him and kids at signing statements and when he was signing bills. So here's little Owens with our modern Hitler, but we don't recognize this tyrant because he's got brown skin. We all know that tyranny can only come from white skin. In fact, tyranny can only come from a Hitler mustache. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's the same thing repeating itself. Hitler was a National Socialist, and they had government health care, and they used it to take control of people's lives. And now here's this poor little boy up on television being used. Leif in Montana, you're on the air. Thanks for holding.
How you doing, Alex?
I'm doing as best I can to fight these people. Go ahead.
You're doing great. Earlier this morning, I was listening to one of your shows, one of your past shows, and you mentioned that some of the rich are finding out that they're not really some of the elite. A few years ago, I was attending a Sundance, and the holy man that conducts the ceremony was telling of a time that he had been shown when America was under starvation, and not because there was a food shortage, but because the super rich were hoarding the food. The super elite, the real rich, are the ones that are going to run everyone.
You know, I've actually heard some of those Native Americans, they've been saying that for 100 years, that was going to come to America and that the elite were going to shut off the food. The same way they put Native Americans on reservations, the same way they broke up their families. Hitler bragged that he took his ideas on how to set up camps from what was done by the British and others here in the United States.
Well, and reservations are a good example of how you treat us will also come to you. You know, we're allowing these few people to control everything. But just look at the microculture on a reservation. They're trying to do the whole world that way.
And I hope listeners realize that when I make films like Endgame and I show you books like Eco Science by the White House Science Czar, they talk about their goal is setting up world government and then killing the majority of the population. That's the truth. Doesn't matter how nuts it sounds. We're not nuts talking about it. The nuts are the people that write this.
They are. And we're familiar with it. Our concern, you know, I'm Native. Our concern is about the human race, not just about, you know, the poor Indian. We're all falling under this, and it's up to us to change it. Us as a human race, not to be slaves, to push them back and say no and become active in our families and our community again, to push back.
Well, I've read that many of the Native Americans are exempt from this because you're your own nation, but you're already under a lot of the reservation and federal control already.
It is, yeah. It's not true sovereignty like they tell us. You know, we pay taxes. We're bound by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And in some ways, we find it interesting. Barack Obama has been adopted by the Crow Indians. And in our world, an adoption is zipped by blood. But it still doesn't make him a decent human being just because he's Indian now.
He's nothing but a puppet reading off a teleprompter. God bless you. Final hour, straight ahead. More calls, tons of news. It is already the fourth and final hour of this Thursday, the 25th day of March 2010 edition. I'm going to continue covering news, and we're going to be taking your phone calls at the bottom of the hour. I'm going to have Matt Ryan, one of my producers, in here to tell you a little story that happened to some of his relatives and how it ties into victim disarmament and these Brinks commercials where it shows these thugs trying to attack women, and they just huddle down with their alarm going off, and that supposedly protects them. That is not truth in advertising. It's fine to have an alarm to let you know somebody's breaking in. The next step is to have the firearm to defend yourself and to stop the attacker, stop them dead in their tracks. So that is coming up also. Right now, let's go ahead and go back to your calls. Let's talk to Leo in Missouri. You're on the air.
Good afternoon, Alex.
Welcome.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on something I had been thinking about, and that is, as opposition grows amongst the people to this health care bill, what do you think the chances are of a big-scale terrorist attack happening in this country?
That's all I've been talking about the last 3-4 months, is that they're going to stage events and blame it on the Tea Parties. They're going to stage events and blame it on the birthers and 9/11 truth, and you've seen that start. And in every case, it's clear that this is being staged. And the Southern Poverty Law Center and ADL are out preparing the public mind for this. And they're absolutely going to have staged terror attacks to be able to force all this through. And I agree with Rush Limbaugh. They may stage events to try to suspend the election. There is no doubt there's been a lot of talk about suspension of elections before because of the police state being set up, but now they've got it in place.
And I guess today it was just a big coincidence that Osama bin Laden showed up back in the news again.
That's right. Every time they need a good distraction, Governor Ridge admitted, former head of Homeland Security last year in a book, that they would issue fake terror alerts for political gain as a political distraction. In the Patriot Act, issuing a fake terror threat or alert is a very serious felony, but it's okay when the government does it.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. Well, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. Thanks for taking my call.
Leo, incredibly powerful points. 1-800-259-9231 is the toll-free number to join us. Doug in Oregon, you're on the air.
Afternoon, Alex.
Welcome.
Hello?
Yes, welcome.
Oh, hey. Alice, I was wondering if you could possibly give us a resource or, a web resource, or maybe you could get a special guest on to inform the listeners, how do you go about convening a grand jury to indict these people? How do you go about starting a recall? How do you get your attorney generals to look at evidence and these kind of things? Because I think so many people are overwhelmed by the bureaucracy of it all.
Well, look, number one, you call them, you go visit them in their offices, you demand strong action. I had Judge Napolitano talk about solutions in the second hour today. We've had Red Beckman on many times. We had him on a few weeks ago. In fact, let's go ahead and get Red Beckman back on for another hour just to talk about how to get grand juries convened. The government's tried to turn grand juries into creatures of the prosecutors, where they are kept political slaves, basically, of the system, when grand juries are supposed to decide in many cases what they want to go after. And so you simply try to bring information to the grand jury. There's different procedures depending on your state to do that, but that's a good idea. We will do an hour on that next week.
Okay, Alex, I thank you very kindly, and God's grace and peace to your family, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much for the call. Okay, we're going to go to break. I'm going to come back and get into some more news, recap some top stories, and then we're going to continue with your calls and then get into this victimization of society where everybody just lays there and takes it, this domestication. It's all coming up after this quick break. You have found it, the front lines of the info war, as we wage war on corruption and crash with the lies and disinformation. We'll be right back. Stay with us.